And thanks for joining us today as we continue to talk about engaging those consumers. Of course, thanks to Brand Innovators for the opportunity to be here and for the chance to introduce the other person on your screen. Again, John Hall of Whirlpool. John is currently the head of market strategy at Whirlpool and someone with some fascinating insight into modern consumer engagement. He's a Michigan native, a West Point grad, a veteran of Operation Iraqi Freedom with a pretty amazing and very surprising brand marketing connection we'll get into, and a leader of teams behind some iconic consumer brands like Velveeta, Kraft Mac and Cheese, Bullseye Barbecue Sauce, and Planters Peanut Butter, as well as somebody who took on a pretty incredible opportunity at Whirlpool to reposition their brand, along with some well-known high-value sub-brands like Jenner that you know and love. He's a father, a teacher, and an all-around really interesting guy I'm very excited to hear from. So John, can't wait to get into it, but first, just want to thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Nate. Thanks for having me. I skipped lunch today, and after hearing you talk about Kraft Mac and Cheese, I might have to go back and get a little bit of Kraft Mac and Cheese.
You've changed a lot of lives. So just a quick FYI for everybody, if you're just joining us, feel free to throw any questions you have into the Q&A widget here. I'll try to keep an eye on that, and we'll leave a little time to go through them at the end. And apologies if John and I just get lost in the subject here because it's good stuff. So John, when we get to talk the other day in anticipation of this conversation, I got to learn just a little bit about your background in the military and how it ultimately launched sort of the second career in marketing. For the benefit of everyone listening who was not a part of that conversation, can you just start us off with the story behind that and how it kind of uniquely prepared you for some really different challenges in brand marketing and consumer engagement?
Yeah, for sure, Nate. It's really kind of my story on how I actually got into marketing. I didn't know I was doing marketing in the moment until I eventually got to Kraft Foods and they were telling me I was doing marketing. So it's about 2006 or so. I was an Army captain on my second year-long deployment in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. I was in the town of Adwar, which was Saddam Hussein's hometown. It's actually where they found him. But I was in the middle of a transition where I was what we called one of the first non-lethal operators. So I had a non-lethal team, and the goal of the team was to improve the perception of coalition forces to the Iraqi population. A high percentage, well north of 95% of the population loved what we were doing there at that time. A lot of rebuilding of schools, a lot of fixing hospitals, providing security for the governance to take over, kind of cleaning the streets, and yet there were still quite a few attacks that were happening. The other thing that was happening is we were training the Army force, the Iraqi Army force, the Iraqi police force, and they were fully stood up operational units that could go out and help the civilian population, but interestingly, nobody would call the number. Nobody would call 911. So part of the goal that I had was to improve the perception by, showing kind of what was happening to the local population. But also the call to action was, if you need help, to call this number. There's a support team that.
Did we lose John? Not sure if it's just me or if John's connection.
Direction, but am I still coming through okay, Nate?
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah. Sorry about that. We were at patrols going out in the streets every single day, doing our missions, and was arming them with talking points and kind of word of mouth, sharing, all the investments we were making in the community. And kind of the Starship thing that we did was we built a radio station and hosted a radio show. And so essentially we were messaging through radio, through print, through billboard, out of home, through word of mouth, all the investments that were happening in the area. And we were bringing in like religious leaders and police chiefs and Army captains to partner and talk with the coalition leaders on all the investments that were happening in the area. And the call to action was always, if you need help, call this number. It was called the JCC number. But basically in the United States, we call that 911. And So we had no phone calls on a weekly basis. And all of a sudden, within 3 to 4 weeks, we started to get 5, 6 phone calls per week of people reporting in, hey, you might want to look at the corner of X and Y. There's a big building there. Go look in the basement, and we'd find a bomb making facility. They'd tell us, there's a carcass on the side of the road. You might want to look inside that carcass. And we'd send the bomb team out there, and we'd find out there's a roadside bomb. We found out where attacks were being staged, and it basically gave us battlefield intelligence that allowed us to get a very small group of people of a town of 20,000 folks off the streets, and our weekly attacks dramatically declined after this. So for me, it was the first kind of foray into marketing. We even got into, believe it or not, consumer engagement, because the radio station got to a two-way conversation where people could call in live, like they do here in the United States, and speak directly to a coalition commander and kind of, translated through the air, get the truth. Many people wanted to help in writing the news articles for the newspaper. And so we were getting quite a bit of consumer engagement. And for me, first time into it, I was seeing the results. I was seeing and hearing the 911 station, which was on the same base as us, getting phone calls. And our teams would go out and be able to, go out there and prevent deaths, actually. So that's kind of how I got into marketing. And then from there, kind of transitioned over to Kraft Foods, where I got a chance to work on a bunch of those iconic brands that you talked about.
That is marketing with stakes. If you can handle that, I feel like you can handle anything. So I want to get into the topic that I really want to pick your brain on. One of my favorite ideas in technology, which is where I work at Botify, is the idea of owning your stack. Right? And in tech, that basically means if there's some piece of technology you're dependent on for functionality or customer service or making money, whatever, it's generally a good idea to have control of that. So you can add value, so you can not get boxed out, et cetera, et cetera. I think, and we chatted about this a little, John, I think something really similar has happened recently with consumers and brand experiences. And there's this whole direct-to-consumer explosion where brands are increasingly delivering these end-to-end experiences. How you discover something, how you learn about it, how you buy it, how you get it, and then ultimately even how you own it and connect it to other things. And I think people think of a couple of brands, Apple and companies like that right off the bat, but I think this is also a much larger trend, and I think you've been in the middle of it, and I'd love to get your take on it. So, have you been seeing this? What do you think is causing it? And where is this going?
Yes, without a doubt, I have been seeing it. And as I kind of shared a little bit of my background, kind of growing up in marketing at Kraft Foods, and eventually moving over to Whirlpool Corporation, very different path of purchase. I grew up in an environment where there was always this promise of the IMC, integrated marketing communications. Any brand team knows what I'm talking about. Agency team knows what I'm talking about. And, at the core of that was this idea of, putting the right message in front of the consumer at the right time and having the emotion, the connection to kind of, sway behavior, favorably toward, the business that you're the product or service you're selling. But, I believed in the concept, but the concept always fell short to me because it was heavily driven by the media plan. It was heavily driven by, the investment you were making across the flow charts, the media flow charts. And it didn't hit all aspects of the business. And I think today what we're seeing is a transition from IMC to more of this full end-to-end desired consumer experience. It was the original promise of IMC, but the difference is it's not a media flow chart. It's the actual alignment and coordination internally across cross functions to deliver on a strategic brand experience that's tied to a cluster of consumers in the market that have certain expectations. So, so yes, without a doubt, I'm seeing it, it's happening, and it's kind of cool to see what the promise of IMC really was supposed to be back in the day. In terms of the cause, there's a couple of things. From a kind of one level, consumer expectations around convenience. If you look at where money's being spent, convenience is often around it. If it's convenient, consumers are interested in it for sure. The other one is this sense of expectations around entitlement. And so, simply put, people want to go through life with reduced friction and increased access. And so when you kind of think about that, the end-to-end experience where you're removing friction out of a shopping process, you're making the ease of the ownership of a product, whether it's got an issue or not, you're making that easy for the consumer. They're ultimately going to reward you. They're going to go towards the better experiences that are creating utility. On a different level, digital technologies, the explosion of omni-channel capabilities has allowed marketers to get into the gaps across the different journeys that the consumers are on. Brands, as another point, have more today than ever, have real meaning in the world. And when you have a brand that has meaning, that has a following, that people are willing to spend more money on for whatever value it's creating, it has to be protected. And so the protection leads to a desire to have more control. And the more control of the ecosystem, Apple, Amazon, the more you're able to provide an experience to the consumer that is on their expectations. And then the last point that I think is causing this is results. I mean, if anyone was really being honest with like all their marketing investments, there's parts of the marketing mix that you're just not sure if it's having the right impact on your business, and those days I think are over. I think that, CMOs and marketers, if you're not tying your marketing investments to a positive impact on your business, it's the resources just aren't going to stay there. So in the desire to drive more and more tangible results behind your investments, the D2C channel in particular it's clear as day. There's no doubt, as you're investing in a certain, platform or a media investment or some type of experience you're creating for the consumer, and you can start to see the D2C channels pick up, it's in-house. You're seeing it directly. So I think a lot of that is what's driving it. Kind of an example for me that's pretty cool. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Blender's sunglasses, but I grew up in a world of Oakleys. You go to the store, you try them on. And now, for some reason, in my social feed, every time I feel the need to buy a pair of sunglasses, it's sitting right there, and they got my credit card, and I'm like, order. So somehow I'm buying sunglasses on a weekly basis right now. But that's they show up on time. It's a great experience. They work, and it's just easy for me to maintain these sunglasses. So that's kind of a cool example. But and you asked where it's going. I think it's clear to me that this is going to become more and more of a reality for brands and businesses. And it's going to be, especially in the considered path to purchase. There's definitely a difference between, shopping for a 10,000 suite of, Whirlpool appliances than buying a can of beer.
Yep.
We've got way more opportunity to create experiences and engagement opportunities that our audience, finds a value. So I think it's the marketers that are casting vision across the entire business and then coordinating their process partners to deliver, whether it's pre-purchase or post-purchase, but ultimately delivering that brand promise at every different interaction.
I was going to ask about upsides and downsides of this, but I think you actually covered some of the upsides. I mean, elements like strategic control of things. It's just really, really important. I'm curious about the downsides, right? Because it's this becomes a trend. It becomes something that has real value to it, and in some spaces, it almost becomes not optional, right? What are some of the challenges, not necessarily of execution, which I want to cover in a minute, but of just this change in the market? What gets harder because this is now the new standard for engagement?
Yeah, there just real quick on, there are more. I mean, upsides, like your acquisition costs are way cheaper when you can kind of, when people, have a great experience buying, a refrigerator from Whirlpool. The next time they go in and it's a great experience, they're probably going to buy the range from Whirlpool and the wall oven, and that's good. That lowers acquisition cost. The other thing that's kind of neat is, it's you got to kind of let your mind, think a little bigger for a second, but like new sources of revenue, like stretching brands outside their categories, or bringing categories that aren't that obvious to one category. If you're doing a great job in the ownership experience, that consumer is willing to cross sell. So, if you're, buying, if you've got Whirlpool washers and dryers and we start serving you like, our detergents, makes a lot of sense. The people that made a washer and dryer are the same people that can, auto replenish your detergents. And let's be honest, it's not that fun to go to the store and buy, a Tide detergent.
There's convenience again, right?
Show up when it needs to show up, so you start to get to like alternative sources of revenue. Stronger correlation between your marketing investments and the business results, which we all have that responsibility, as I was talking to earlier. But to your point on the downside, like if this was easy, everybody would be doing it. Everybody would be Apple, everybody would be Amazon. So, I think there are companies out there doing it. Nike is a great example. I think the airline is a good example. Southwest Airlines. I think online banking is a good example, where if you're really kind of paying attention, the experience that you go about buying their product or their service, and then after you purchase it, the utility you get and the ease of information and knowledge transfer, like they're doing a pretty good job with that. And I'm happy to keep flying Southwest for that reason, or
Great.
the same bank, because I've had a, really interesting example with purchasing life insurance recently and from USA. And that could be a complex process, but like all digitized, all done through the app, like, even the medical checkup and all that stuff. It was just all the friction was removed out of the process. It made it pretty easy. I'll be happy to go back there again. Right. But just in terms of the some other things, so yeah, your comment on downside. It takes time. It has to have vision. You have to have leadership that's convicted. You have to drive some sort of differentiation versus your competitive set. That's where your brand strategies have to be rock solid, connected to your consumer audience, and then cascaded across all the different touch points. It's a lot of coordinate, like even some of your process partners that you're used to working with, procurement, finance, like that group of folks have to like think differently about like the full experience, because historically it was maybe more in silos. Now you're kind of working across the different process partners. The other thing is technology. You got to invest. You have to have the stomach to invest in technology. You have to have the stomach to invest in different people that think differently, that maybe didn't grow up in your industry. And then, change. Anytime you're doing this, it's change, and change leadership, change management is not easy. So it's, like I said, if it was easy, everyone would be Amazon and Apple, but it's not. And it takes kind of a long vision over multiple years to get there.
Well, you talk about sort of change being forced on people. I mean, look at the last year, right? I mean, talk about putting a strategy to the test and the trial by fire, right? I mean, has this been a good or a bad time to own that full brand experience? I know from our discussion that you are pretty far down this road, and it's not like this hits you mid-development, but what's it been like? I mean, and do you think that this very different world, which leans so heavily on convenience and experience just to serve consumer needs, is that going to take a step back to kind of where we were, or is this just the trend that was happening anyway, and this has just pushed us into the future?
Well, yeah, I think the obvious answer is the brands that have been down this path, during these unfortunate times of COVID, have fared very, very well. I mean, if your brand was we've had some brands for certain reasons that are, distributed in traditional channels. If the government shuts those channels down, nobody's buying your product. Like you have no access to your product, right? So I do think the brands that have been thinking more end to end, have been thinking more about experience design across the full funnel of marketing, probably did very well. They did do very well through the COVID pandemic environment. I mean, it blows my mind when I walk down my neighborhood and the number of Amazon boxes I see stacked up. I mean, people have boxes stacked up like this, or Stitch Fix boxes. All these D2C channels, they're just stacked up and they're showing up on time, and they're easy to return if you need to return them. And again, going back to not just the distribution that got cut off in some ways, but also the delivery on convenience. People have busy lives. So I think that those brands are doing very, very well. There's no doubt about that. And COVID probably, if anything, has accelerated it. And I think that if brands or businesses haven't been down that path, they're really thinking about it right now, and probably doing things that are more setting them up for this type of success in the future. Interestingly, I do think that when you think about those distribution channels, the value space is, I think, always going to be there. There's always going to be like people kind of walking in those stores, and even in the luxury space, those high end purchases, people want to go in and kind of go through that experience of buying that, already, that Bugatti or whatever. But the middle space is just going to keep expanding and expanding, and brands are kind of winning on this emergence of experience design, but technology and delivering your brand promises on consumer expectations at every single touch point, not just the upper funnel, but throughout the entire funnel.
So I think one of the great things about having you here, John, is that, you executed this and done this. And I think, everybody's had a PowerPoint slide put in front of them that says direct to consumer, control the experience. And that's very different than the logistics, especially a large, complicated brand, of actually putting that into play. And we talked a little bit about some of the organizational challenges, different groups that now are that drive experience have to be on the same page. But I'm curious about any other sort of, including actual things that have happened to you, sort of the challenges of actually executing and getting this in place. What's been the hardest thing, and what, if anything, has actually taken longer than you've expected?
Yeah, we're, just to be clear, like we're kind of in it in a lot of ways right now. So, the first thing I'd say is, like, there's no clear playbook. Like, you know what I mean? It's more akin to building a brand new business, white space, kind of starting from scratch, than it is to like, hey, here's the playbook, just execute it. So I think, there are some proxies out there. I talked about a couple of them already, but I think there's a lot of challenges and mistakes that can be made along the process. And that's why I was talking about vision and leadership conviction from the beginning, because it takes time, and there's a lot of pieces that have to move around. So, first thing I'd say is, strategic planning. So you have to know why your brand exists in the world. You have to be able to think about your brand experiences across your consumer decision journey, if you will. And so experience design, consumer and shopper understanding, resource prioritization, capability audits. Like, you got to know where you want to go. You got to get that all kind of stood up. And, in my experiences, it's taken years to get that stuff all stood up. I mean, years. I'm talking, 3 to 5 years to get all that stuff foundationally aligned. So that takes time. And then you start to think about the execution, and there's so many backing components when you think about your inventory, distribution, delivery, service, as you start to own parts of the experience that are new, to, a 100-year-old company, even a 100-year-old company, those things can be new. So it takes a lot of internal alignment and getting folks heading in the right direction. But let's be honest, Amazon and Apple weren't, those experiences that they've created, they weren't built overnight. If you look in hindsight, they've been building over years. I can remember when Amazon was just the idea of getting on like the website to order something other than a book was odd. And now, like,
what we do,
ordering my kids' birthday gifts, like, you just jumped in the cart. He had saved a bunch of things he liked, and hit order, and they're there the next day. So like, that takes time to build all that infrastructure. But the other thing that I think, for older brands or non like Amazon, like startup type brands, I think, the importance of brand strength, because of the challenges and the concerns around channel conflict. That's whether you're a CPG company or whether you're durables, that's no laughing matter by any means. So you really have to make sure that you have very strong brands that have pull, that consumers want, that they're looking for, they expect to be on that floor if you have those type of alternative channels. But you do have to always be thinking about the risk of being depositioned. We've all seen and probably read and heard about, Dollar Shave Club versus Gillette. It's a great example to look for. I mean, you always got to think, where's that Dollar Shave Club coming from, and how are you outpacing that type of innovation? So those are just some thoughts on how to get to it. But like, we haven't mastered it by any means. Right. So we're very much in the build process.
So the one thing that's really interesting is, you kind of somebody has to make the decision. I mean, and it's not a monolithic thing, but, to do this and to say that this is the right move for us, including trends and everything else. So how do you, two things. One, how do you ultimately know if this is the right strategy for a given brand? I think you had some good, you talked about that middle space, right? Where I think a lot of this is growing. So how do you know if it's right for you? And then once it's implemented, I think sort of aside from just, soft qualitative things, like how do you know if this is working the way that it should? Are these traditional KPIs? Is this just business results? Or are there other things you would look at as you start to move this way to measure the effectiveness of what's happening?
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, like, we are, in a lot of, like many companies in implementation right now. It's very, very, still very new. The one thing that I would kind of point out, though, to answer your question is it has a lot to do, I think, with the consumer decision journey and the depth of how your consumer decision journey works. As I alluded to a little bit earlier, buying a can of beer, and claiming an experience-based consumer engagement as the driver, is very different than buying a $10,000 suite of kitchen appliances. So the more considered path to purchase, the durables, cars, mattresses, small appliances, phones, even expensive clothes, very different than a box of mac and cheese, right? So I think that has a lot to do with your ability to really create experiences that are aligned with your brand, that the consumer appreciates, and causes them to recommend, hey, you're going to go buy, a kitchen of appliances, check out Whirlpool. It's an awesome experience, great product, ease of knowledge transfer, those type of things. So I think the actual shopping journey has a lot to do with that decision, and can you get there? I think there are some interesting brands, though, that are not as obvious. Like Gatorade is an example. I think Gatorade's a CPG like brand that on the surface doesn't seem like it might be able to drive the level of engagement that a consumer path to purchase can. But you look at some of the stuff they've recently done, they're starting to move, they've been moving beyond just a sports beverage for some time now, and becoming kind of this fuel-based company that's even bringing in technology to help you perform at a higher level. So you can get there, and I think that's one that's kind of heading in that direction, which is cool to observe. The other part of your question is KPIs. And we've done at Whirlpool, we've done a fantastic job with the way we monitor and understand the drivers within the consumer decision journey, and if they're having the impact on the business that we're expecting. But the approach to measuring across the end-to-end the consumer decision journey is shifting from non-linear to a more dynamic omni-channel. So I think the KPIs are changing, and the data measurement tools are getting more innovative, and you got to be careful not to have so much measurement you get bogged down to it, but you got to be able to centralize it in a way where you understand where your investments are going, and are they having the right impact at the right kind of micro interaction that you're after, and if so, keep driving it. If not, make the adjustment. So I think the KPIs are going to continue to change, and we're even working through that a little bit to understand the more omni-channel consumer experience in what data sets you need to understand and focus on versus the ones that you don't really need to focus on.
So you've got, new data sets, new disciplines, all these different things involved. And, John, you build teams, you lead this kind of stuff. What kind of competencies do you need? And it doesn't have to be, all of them, but what are the key ones, I think, that you need to pull something like this off? Obviously, you have to do the usual things, make great products, make the right products. But what are you looking for lately that you maybe didn't think about in the past?
Yeah. I don't want anyone to think that I'm an expert here by any means. One of the things I love about marketing is you can have some experiences, and you can share those experiences with people and help them, grow and develop as a marketer. But if any marketer is really being honest with you, we're all growing every single day because the world changes so fast, and we have to be alert to that. And that's what I love about this field. So I'll just share a couple of things, but no expertise at this at all. And I even love the idea of even the role of the CMO is changing, like, the chief marketing officer. It's going to become more of a CXO. chief experience officer. Now that to me indicates where the competencies are heading. And so your ability to create convicted brand strategies grounded in data and cascaded across your business, that's part of the formula. I think the understanding of digital tools, specifically screens right now, and experience design and development is a huge competency, because a lot of these considered path to purchases are converging in and around, these things, right? And so that's a huge talent. Like, that's a very different talent, in a company that, was bending metal and great at thermodynamic and structural design. This is a completely new talent. So that's part of it. Creative problem solvers that are comfortable with technology platforms, and technology leaders that are comfortable with creative thinking. Like that blend is very interesting. We've always talked about creative and media, but you're talking creative and technology, which I think is a very cool interaction that I'm seeing. Innovative thinkers are always going to be here, that are willing to push beyond categories to create value across the ecosystem that I was talking about earlier. This is more growth-minded leadership, right? This stuff is a lot of these ideas, and it's definitely not in the kind of the more fixed mindset space. It's more in the growth mindset. So just kind of uncomfortable and ambiguous and dynamic environments, because things are changing. And like I said, there is no playbook. Like, so, right? You may be, the person that's expected to have all the answers, but, if you're honest, you're kind of learning and providing recommendations at the same time. So, the marketing community helps each other out, I think, quite a bit. But there's no unicorn. I don't think there's a one skill that you're after. It's really a blend of these digital oriented skill sets combined with the modernization of older skill, like more traditional skill sets. Imagine being able to talk to your finance partner, your corporate strategy partner, your sales partner, and helping them think in a way that's more in this end-to-end mindset. And they can get there, absolutely, but you got to kind of reframe things a little bit every once in a while. So I hope that answers your question, but I love the direction to more experienced thinking away from just pure marketing.
Well, it's interesting because it seems like it's almost, not to use a cliche, but it's a little bit of like a cultural shift, right? Where you're taking, it's not so much a one skill you can plug in and all of a sudden you're doing this. If you're thinking about integrating your entire organization so that it solves a problem for the customer and you're really doing that, that's more communication between functions and this sort of holistic thinking. And that's, again, a little more cultural, I think, than just, I know how to do X.
That's correct. Yeah, totally agree with that.
So we got to get to questions in a minute because we've got a few popping in, but I'll close with something pretty open-ended for you. I mean, we've talked about change and adapting a lot. And we know that, there is no playbook and you don't have all the answers, but I would say if you could, maybe even talk to yourself a few years ago and say, hey, here's something that I've learned. If I'm a big brand and I'm preparing for this and I have a lot at stake, but maybe I'm not on the cutting edge of, consumer engagement, what would you tell them or tell that old version of yourself to really be ready for when you go through something like this?
Yeah, I'd say kind of three things I'd throw out there, and they're not tied really in any way. Just three thoughts. One of them is a distinct and ownable brand strategy that you are able to provide strategic guidance into your product development, your service development, distribution decisions, your pricing decisions, and then start to expand that into the experience across your shopping journey. I think that's where a lot of the struggle is, because I can tell you as I've gone through that, it takes time. It takes a lot of research, a lot of understanding the research, and a lot of courage for the teams to cast that vision. Your marketing teams are becoming strategic drivers of the business, not tactical executors of the business. So that's a huge shift as brand marketeers driving the business, as opposed to just pure execution. So I think that there's a huge responsibility into owning that and then casting those visions across your path to purchase. That's one I'd throw. I'd say if you're in the considered offering space, people are thinking a little bit more through the decision. I think, this is going to be very tactical. I'm going to call it websites. You can call it screens, mobile screen, whatever it is, but website, mobile design, that space is critical. That's the front door to your house That's the front door to your brand. That's where people are likely to go to get information and learn and draw conclusions. And so if it's a considered path to purchase, you've got to provide information and knowledge transfer and remove the friction out of the process for the consumer so that they can, you're earning their trust in there. So I think there was a day, 10 years ago where we were thinking, build your website, get your products up there, and then you're done. It's alive. It's a beast that's constantly growing, and it's an integral part of your experience design. And then lastly, you mentioned to it earlier, organizing to take more control of your branded experience to deliver on your there's an element of organization, internal organization, to get all, it's a huge team of folks that have to come together to deliver on that branded experience. So organizational design is a big part of it.
So be ready for some change.
No doubt about it. Yeah.
Buckle up. That's good advice. All right. So I want to get to some of the questions that are in here. They're pretty varied. So get ready, John. Here's one that's a little tactical, but before COVID, what were some of the big sort of maybe traditional media marketing trends you were excited about that maybe are not as relevant anymore?
Before COVID,
I know it's a long time, right? It feels like it was 1,000 years ago.
Well, I mean, honestly, this is going to sound tactical, but I was leading the Gen Air brand and product teams. And pretty super premium niche target, highly affluent target that we're after. We were doing big storytelling around our brand and the products that we're offering, and we were able to get into certain zip codes, to get into movie theaters, and put some of our big storytellings on big display in front of our audience, in the theaters, to highly affluent zip codes and things like that. That's clearly something that's not of interest right now, unfortunately. But if I could kind of parlay on that response and say, hey, what are some things that you're excited about and you're still excited about? We're doing some really awesome work on the Gen Air team is doing this, but putting some of our digital screens out there in retail. So if you think about like kind of synchronizing your end-to-end experience, and you're coming through your .com experiences, and you've obviously got data you can manage and track there and optimize and give greater experiences to your consumers, but there are also capabilities to put those out into the world as well, and great screen shopping experiences that in an environment where maybe you have only allowed to show 20 of your products, can have a screen right there that can show 200 of your products, right? And you get a decent sense for the feel of the product, the look, the design, the touch, and maybe it's not the exact one you want, but you can see the offering of through that screen, and that's another area of data measurement. Our screens are connected to the cloud, and we're able to measure data, provide information over the air if we need to. So that was something I was kind of excited to see, was that linkage between, this is almost the opposite direction of D2C, but like the linkage between that manufacturing site down into a retailer floor to aid a sales associate to provide information and to try to increase that shopping experience. That was a technology I was pretty excited about.
No, that's very cool to take that end-to-end thing and apply that to channels that you normally would think are not end-to-end. Well, we're going to make them kind of end-to-end.
That's right.
Yeah, that's very cool. You mentioned the sunglasses example, but are there any other brands that you as a consumer are engaging with differently in 2021?
Yeah, this one's probably people have mentioned this one before, but and this might even sound late to the game, but Peloton's been quite interesting to me from the beginning, from the purchase of it to the delivery at my home, to the first ride, to the the connection to the social media, to share your rides and almost like get to know the instructors, and then they're expanding into other categories. I think that's a really cool example of a brand that someone like a company like Whirlpool we can kind of look to and like draw a lot of insight and kind of inspiration from, and to challenge some of our thinking to create great experiences for our consumers. So that's been a neat one, which is a very expensive purchase that after having it in my home and being involved in it with it, like totally worth it. In fact, my kids ride on it too. It's really cool. Yeah.
We got one in the summer, and I remember thinking, there was something making a noise, and in my head I thought, well, of course they'll fix it, because this brand experience everything's been together, right? This isn't just a traditional piece of equipment that maybe it's broken, I'll just tell them. I assume they'll make it work, because it's been a great brand experience. That's a good one. Let's see, I had another one. Let's see. I don't know what the definition of flying off the shelves is for, major kitchen appliances, but, what, if anything, was started to fly off the shelf when the pandemic started? And did you see any surprising trends? I could see, if this was a craft story, I can imagine there'd be tons of great examples, but what do you have?
Yeah, no, actually, you're not going to be surprised to hear this, but yeah, appliances are flying off the shelves. They absolutely are. I mean, people, for two reasons. And the one that's coming to mind is, KitchenAid stand mixers, the iconic stand mixer. That team's selling a lot of awesome different colored stand mixers right now, I can imagine. But cooking, families are cooking together a lot more. So, we've got a small appliance business, and those products are being used quite a bit right now. The other thing is, people are, probably to no surprise, people are what I call position improvement, coming from the military, position improvement. So you're improving your offices, you're improving your kitchen, improving the area you're living in. And, that means, many people are upgrading their kitchens, and they're putting new appliances in there. They're using them more, washers and dryers. So I think, fortunately for us, we're in an environment where, people are, they need our products, which puts a lot of pressure on us to make sure that we're delivering to them, to our standards of quality and stuff. So it's a good time for this, for our industry. And the other thing I like about that is our products do go out into the world, and they do help people. It's not like we sell, something that's bad for the world. Like, people being able to wash their clothes is a good thing. Clean their utensils is a good thing. Protect their food, cook for the families. That's all good. So it is nice to work in an industry that is in demand, and also, does do good in the world.
And I can say, as a parent who is spending more time in the kitchen with my family, with our appliances, it's not a bad experience to spend a little more time, maybe making food, talking to the kids, doing that whole thing. So
that's right.
Well, with that, we're just about out of time. I'm trying to nail the time here exactly. But again, John, just want to thank you for being an amazing guest, really easy guy to work with and talk to. And in addition to just knowing and sharing a lot of interesting ideas. And of course, thanks again to Brand Innovators for hosting a great event, and to all of you for hanging out with us. So I'm going to hand it off to Emma.
Yeah, thank you both so much, John. We always love hearing your stories. You have such an interesting background. So thank you both for being here. And Nate, great job moderating. Hope to have you both back again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nate. Thank you, Emma.
Bye, John.
Good rest of your afternoon. Well, everyone who's still tuning in, we're about a little over halfway through our program on consumer engagement. So we're excited to move right into our next fireside chat. We'll be hearing from Brittany Connor, the brand marketing lead at Simple Tire, and moderating her session will be Liza Mandel, the VP of East Coast Sales at Influential. Hi, ladies. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello. Hey, how are you?
Let me put my video on here. Hi, how are you?
Good. Well, I'll hand it off to you guys. Don't want to waste any time, but so excited to hear from you.
Thanks so much.
Hi,
hey,
Liza.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you? It's good to see you again.
Good. I know. It's so nice to see you as well.